Have you ever felt like your entire world just shifted in an instant? Like one moment, everything seems certain, and the next, you're standing at a crossroads you never expected. This is exactly what happened to my guest today, Sarena Diamond. And Sarena, after 30 years in corporate America, she walked into what she thought was a regular meeting, only to realize within minutes that her executive career was over. Just like that. She hadn't planned this. She hadn't wanted this. But looking back, it was the best thing that ever happened to her. And in this episode of From a Woman to a Leader, Sarena shares the incredible mindset shift that changed everything for her. The power of end. Too often we get stuck in the idea of either or. Either we stay in a stable job or we follow our dreams. Either we take a risk or we play it safe. But what if there is not only one way? For years, I thought there was only one way for me to grow my career. I can stay in engineering and grow into higher leadership roles. But what if you can do both? What if your career and your life could be multi-directional? Sarena, my guest, went from shock and uncertainty to building a thriving consulting business, all because she stopped choosing or and embraced the end. In this episode, we talk about how to navigate career transitions, especially when they are unexpected, the emotional impact of leaving corporate after decades, and how to find clarity. Why women in transition often undervalue their skills and how to change that. How to create a career that aligns with both your expertise, and your passion. And yes, it's possible. So if you ever wonder whether it's time for a change or how to step into something new without giving up everything you've built, I think this episode is for you. So please join me and Sarena Diamond for an inspiring, eye-opening conversation. And listen now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever, platform you like to tune in. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and tag a friend who needs to hear that. Your career doesn't have to be either or. It can be and. And it all starts with listening to this episode. Before we dive into the episode, I want to introduce you myself. Hi everyone, I'm Limor Bergman-Gross. I'm your host, and this is From a Woman to a Leader, a podcast dedicated for you, women in tech and women in male-dominant field, and we dive deep into real stories, real challenges, real strategies to help you rise in your careers. And I'm doing that because I'm super passionate about women, and especially women in tech. For those of you who don't know me, so first of all, welcome and thank you for being here today. And I've been in tech for over 20 years, started my career in the software development role and grew into leadership. And I thought there was either or, like there was only one option for me. I wish I knew the power of and back then. Are you ready to open your mind to possibilities? So let's dive right in. Hi, Sarena. How are you?
We're very good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. It's lovely to see you again, and I'm super excited for our conversation.
So am I. This is awesome.
Yeah. So maybe we'll start a little bit by your journey, because you worked in corporate for 30 years and then made a huge change, and would love to hear a little bit about your background working
Thanks.
in corporate.
You're absolutely right. It was just over 30 years in corporate America, and I came from an entrepreneurial family. As a matter of fact, I was the first one to venture into that. I think primarily because watching people be entrepreneurs, you just see how hard it is. And I think there was a piece of me that said, no, there's got to be a different way. But it's interesting because I think growing up in that family, in that lifestyle, working hard, being reliable, being yourself was something that was instilled in me. It's part of DNA. So I think even in corporate America, I was always a little entrepreneurial. I used to joke that I didn't really fit. Like I wouldn't just follow the standard operating procedure because that was what was written down. It
Yeah.
was always about finding a way to succeed, finding a path to something. Whether I was a new programmer at Accenture, or even as when I was a transformational leader at IBM at the end of my career, it was always about finding ways to make things work and have people succeed and teams succeed. So I think some of that, certainly being entrepreneurial early on, helped me to achieve through corporate, and certainly made the transition to entrepreneurship later something that was easier to do, I think.
Yeah. And what can you describe a little bit like what was the pivotal moment that kind of drove you to become an entrepreneur?
Well, I wish I could tell you that it was some unique inspiration. I am contractually silenced to talk about details too close. Like
Hmm.
so many, certainly women, all folks there reaches that point where you are have to choose to be, or you were choosing to be separated from a company. And I was stunned. I Not unlike a lot of people that find themselves in transition, could not have been more surprised. I had worked through a lot of this in my function at IBM. And so when I had retired from IBM and gone to another company for just a short period of time, I was very surprised to be on that call, like so many people are on the call with your boss and HR. Actually, the story that day was quite funny because we had been working on a hire, somebody to join my team, and we had been back and forth with some HR specifics. So my first reaction when I popped onto that normal weekly call with my boss and saw my HR partner on the call was great. We're finally getting this position all aligned and getting the roles and responsibilities aligned. 10 minutes in, literally my world crashed. And I think a lot of people these days are surprised. I would like to think that, there's not as much surprise, but I did not have this, "Ooh, I want to retire and be an entrepreneur" goal. That wasn't ever part of my mission. Actually, I had intended to stay with the last company that I was with until I retired. So technically, I guess that was it. That was my motivation.
Yeah.
It really was. And I share this, I think we'll probably end up talking later, but becoming an entrepreneur, it takes a whole set of sort of internal thoughts and processes, but I think that motivation that was thrust upon me, like a lot of people, turning those lemons into lemonade is something that I'm very proud of having done, and I'm continually grateful for the ability to do that. But it certainly was not a motivation that I would have said, yeah, that's something I want to experience.
Yeah. But sometimes, in hindsight, at least things that happens, I mean, the moment they may seem like you know, uh, something bad happened or not something you wished for, but eventually it led you to what you do
100%.
today.
100%. I think back to that day, which actually we're coming up on the anniversary, 3 years of that. And I think back to that day, and I mean, I had all the reactions, not just emotional, there was physical, and it was really, really traumatic. Mostly because there was a huge degree of trust that had been violated. I was told for several weeks before all of the positives that people often are told, all of the, both the combination of what I was delivering, the impact on the business. And at the end of the day, human beings are behind those decisions. I know that. I mean, I ran workforce management for IBM for a lot of years. There are human beings that are behind hard decisions. And I'm not saying any of these decisions or even these people took those decisions lightly. But there are still human beings, and there are human ways to handle those kinds of conversations. And too often I end up talking with people through my networking and in my relationship building that I've been doing over the last 3 years, to hear of the really just horrible ways that some people are experiencing that trauma. Mine was traumatic because there was such a disloyalty that was cast. Somebody that I truly trusted and believed in. Um, and falling back to the, well, this is what the corporate respect is. You're still human beings, and there's ways to do some of those horrible business decisions that affect people's lives without doing them robotically, and here's what the script says I'm supposed to say. I think that
Yeah,
unfortunately there's lots of people that have to struggle through that.
yeah,
But
it's
coming out on the other
unfortunate.
side, it is.
But being on two sides, I've been on both sides, and I can say it's not easy, and a lot of times like because it's so uncomfortable to be in like the side that have to let someone go, then you may do it in a more robotic way just because it's your way of handling this uncomfortable conversation.
For sure. And certainly during the resource action work that I had to do with IBM, we were often supporting the managers and in some cases the client teams that were impacted by the releases. But I do think that there is a humanity that is necessary in those activities that says this is more about the relationships that we have as human beings than it is about. I 100% agree that the manager that's enacting that needs to have good care, good support systems, but doing it in a robotic way, and then maintaining that sort of roboticness, especially if someone is someone that you had built a trusted relationship with. It can't be a surprise when the person impacted sees the lack of humanity in the process. And there's ways to do the process with a human relationship priority without violating laws or being, having those things be something that is going to put the business at risk. My opinion. And I've been through it now. I've been actually helping leaders to manage through operational decisions that would be included in that. And I'm always a fan. I'm always going to be a believer and focus on the people side of it, focus on the human side of it, make sure that you can be true to who you authentically are when this is over.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And I'm going back to kind of the that moment in your life when you were like in transition in your mid 50s, and you mentioned like that you took a trip to Hawaii, and kind of it helped you to start your entrepreneurial journey. So can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. So my family and I had a planned trip to Hawaii. Taking a family of 5 to Hawaii is not an inexpensive endeavor. And just because the plane tickets were booked doesn't mean that you actually go through with it from a financial perspective when you've just been passed this message
Yeah,
that your executive career is over. I will tell you that going to Hawaii I joke that it was the best and worst decision because financially it didn't make any sense. You would instantly cancel a family vacation that was of that magnitude. And I didn't. And I'm so grateful that I didn't because it was being in nature. My family is all we're not the sit on the beach and have people bring us drinks. People, we are, let's go find something to hike or let's go find something to explore. And we did all of that. And being in nature and being with them gave me a sort of a clarity that helped me to see that I needed to rely on the one boss that I could always trust, which was me. And that going out on my own was the genesis, or became the genesis for that decision. I didn't know how I was going to do some of the critical things that needed to happen, business development being the one of them, building a relationship network that would allow me to have a client stream. But I am so grateful for the clarity that came from, watching the sunrise over Oahu. It is unbelievably inspiring to see, what, the day started again. And as much as it was a horrible day before we left, it was really the clarity that came from being in nature and in such a beautiful place was awesome.
that's incredible. And I think, yeah, sometimes we need to step out in order to get clarity.
For sure. Absolutely, for sure. Um, and it did. It provided a level of clarity, a sort of a refreshment. As it turned out, our trip was planned that it would just at the end of that trip was the day that I had to sign my documents, the severance documents to accept severance. And I hadn't decided what I was going to do before I left the trip. And I literally sat on the balcony of our Airbnb and signed those documents on my phone because it took me a long time to come to what am I going to do next. But that the clarity and the peace that came from that, being in such a beautiful surrounding, it can be, the beautiful surroundings can be anywhere. I do believe some of it comes from being outside in
Yeah.
nature for me, but it was really an important part of my journey to get to a place where I could clear that all out and be really positive going into forming Diamond Solution Group and serving clients and the like.
Did you know what you wanted to do, or it wasn't really clear?
The only thing I knew was that I wanted to focus. When I had left IBM, IBM was splitting Kyndryl, and IBM was divesting of Kyndryl. And at the time, I was a shared service supporting both areas of the global business services. So consulting for both technical and business process. And I was responsible for the workforce management function over both of those areas. So I had a lot of work invested in my career around transforming business and being really transformational in that. I knew I wanted to do that exclusively. And so it made sense for me to focus my energy and my business on helping leaders to affect transformation easier, more simply, and really focus there. I knew I wanted to focus there when I left IBM, and I had gone to the short term organization as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just said, I'm going to do this on my own. And what's amazing is that the gamble has been so incredibly well received because there aren't a lot of people that know the kinds of experiences that I've had. They may put up a shingle or they've gotten a
Mm-hmm.
degree in it.
Mm-hmm.
They've gone to the certification course, but having the experiences that I've had throughout the industries, throughout all of the different geographies and locations, has allowed me to have sort of a level of expertise that comes so that I can approach challenges, much more opportunities to do well, to really make things work well.
And you gained so much experience that kind of equipped you to do what you do today. And I wanted to kind of touch base on something that you wrote, and then we'll talk about the end, right? The
Okay.
power of the end. So you mentioned speaking with
Power of and,
Audrey. I
yes.
don't know who Audrey is. Is she your friend?
I met Audrey actually through my outplacement process. And
Okay.
she was somebody who had been doing organizational consulting, and we just hit it off. Sometimes you have those people that you meet and it's like you've known them your whole life. And so we were chatting and talking about different options, and I am a huge fan, and she became a fan of mine, which was funny because I didn't feel worthy of that. And yet she says the same about me. It's very cool. And we were talking about different experiences that I was considering. I could do this, or maybe I would do that, or maybe there was this job, this career, this corporate career. And after one of our conversations, and it was virtual, literally, I had not met her until just this past year. She said, "Why do you keep saying or? What about and?" I heard her. I heard this question, and I asked a couple of things. And then as we started to unwind it, it really changed my whole outlook, because I was saying either I'm going to go get another corporate job, or I'm going to do this, and by having the freedom to say, maybe I'll do all of it, maybe I won't rule out anything individually, it just changed things. And all of a sudden I felt like a newfound fired up. I started relentlessly networking on LinkedIn. I had not been really active. I think a lot of people in corporate spaces, you work so hard while you're in corporate and you sort of let the network languish a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I started re-networking, making connections. I found some really unique ways to come after what I was looking to do. Like, if the job is posted for a full-time hire, someone's going to need to fill in the gap between the time you posted the job and the boss is trying to do that person's job. So fractional COOs, right? There's always a COO that somebody's leaving, and the CEO or the rest of the C-suite is trying to fill in. How do we keep the operations going?
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying to hire somebody. It takes a while. That's not a 3-week, 4-week activity. And so I started literally reaching out to people that I knew I could figure out who the hiring leaders were, and said, "You have a job posted. Here's what I can offer you. I can drop in and help you get through this time of transition, create some operational excellence, very short period of time, and then I can transition to your full-time hire when you're doing that." And I would have people say to me, "Well, would you consider being the full-time hire?" No, 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 no. That's not what I'm not offering to shortcut the process. But it was really an interesting change of approach, because then I started looking at talent sourcers. Become a very big fan of the Catalent model and the BTG model. For people are coming to them to look for leaders that have expertise that could serve in a project mode. And I have done quite a bit of work over the last 3 years with both Catalent and with BTG, and I've been part of other networks as well. Just haven't had the opportunity to do engagements there. But it was really an awesome, freeing activity to say, once that happened.
Yeah, and how can women kind of embrace this power of and? Do you have any tips?
I think probably the most important thing about the power of and is maintaining sort of an open mind. And the way I have always looked to do it is that I always look for similarities. I never look for differences. I can read a book and it be not at all what I'm focused on, but I can find the 80% that appeals to me. It can be on anything. I can listen to a podcast that is nothing about my gender or my time in life, but I can find something. And if you look for the similarities, you look for ways of having the things that are being shared as insights. They don't all have to apply to you, right? But there's something there. I think women and men, but I think women tend to be the whole concept of, our brains multitask more easily. I do think that the power of and for women really needs to be about how do you find those things that are similar? How do you bring those things together?
Yeah, and I think that just today I had a session with the former kind of a colleague of mine, and she was considering a major change, and there are a lot of things she's passionate about, and I remember like what you wrote about the power of and I said like, well, exactly like Audrey asked here, like, why does it have to be that or that or that? Why can't it be all? And she's like, actually, it can be. And I was like, oh my
Well,
god,
that's
I'm already
good,
using it.
right? And Audrey would be thrilled. She's such a humble, inspiring person, and she would be thrilled to know that her question to me and then your question to your friend. I said it yesterday. I had a former colleague that I now knew through my chief network who was asking me. She'd seen what I've been doing, and people follow me on LinkedIn, and she said, I'm considering like going out on my own or maybe consulting for a specific. And I asked her the same thing, and I asked her very specifically, I do think you have to find what makes you happy. Like I have been the most happy in my 30 plus career since I've gone out on my own. And it has really been truly about finding that happiness and being able to be authentically showing up for my clients. I've worked harder in the last 3 years than I ever worked in corporate America, but I have loved every minute of it.
For sure. And I think that one of the challenges of women that are facing that question whether to leave their job, follow their passion, or whatever. I mean, how do you do that? I mean, because you have a comfortable job, high paying job, and then, well, you want to start something, but you don't know how it's going to support you. Do you have any insights on that?
I tell women who talk about this often, the finances are an individual decision. And I would be the biggest hypocrite on the planet if I said, do it, it's great, exclusively. I stayed at IBM for 18 years, primarily because I was a single parent of, at the time, very young children needing to get through and sending kids off to college. I stayed at IBM longer than I ever would have thought, given in some cases the toxicity of the environments that I worked in, given some of the challenges that were there. I continued to try and find something good, a good nugget of some of the really hard roles that I played. And usually that's centered around the relationships that I was building with people. But I do think that the pursuit of those passions has got to be an individual decisions. I think the challenge, lots of women, the finances aside, right? You have to be able to make a living doing it. And one of the things that I actually just told the colleague that I talked to yesterday was, can you do both? That and concept. Can you do what you're doing in your corporate job and start to build up a clientele? There's lots of people, depending on what you're doing, that work after hours, and I actually, she was like, well, that's not possible. I said, okay. And as soon as you start ruling out what's not possible, then you know what those individual decisions are. And I'm not a big one, for never compete, never ever compete with your existing. Do not ever try and pitch clients of your current employer. Like there's some fundamentals that you just can't go back on. But side hustles can be extremely fulfilling and joyful. And if it's a financial stability issue, the other one that lots of people are struggling with is how do I handle my healthcare? My benefits in the United States certainly are tied to corporate.
Yeah.
And so you have to figure those decisions out, but there's ways to do that. There are ways to figure out some of those alternatives. And it becomes a really easy way to not do it if you don't want to go through that aspect. But I do think that there are ways to overcome that, right? Keep moving forward. One of the things I say all the time to clients as well as team members that used to work for me all the way back to the days that I worked at Pepsi is that we need to always find ways to be the water, not the rocks, right? There's always going to be barriers and blockers in your path, but water keeps moving and it keeps moving forward until it reaches its ultimate goal. And lots of times it rounds off or smooths off the rough edges of the rocks that it passes by. And so I say that even with this, if you're looking to pursue your passion to start your own business, how do you find ways to be the water, not the rocks? There's plenty of rocks.
Yeah, and I think that it kind of relates to thing you said earlier, like you don't always have all the answers, and it's okay.
It is okay.
And you can figure things out.
It's actually better. I think it would be really boring if we knew everything that was going to happen and the way the answers were already. It's really exciting. And there are days when I often think, okay, I'm going to start my day with a great sense of anticipation. I always look at my calendar and what could this be? And what are these conversations? And the best days are those days where at the end of the day, you have a sense of accomplishment. It doesn't necessarily have to have been what you anticipated being at the beginning, but that you feel there's a sense of accomplishment there. And I share that with leaders when they're trying to, how do I juggle it all? How do I handle it all? A lot of that is the same, right? It's how do you start each day with a sense of, anticipation? And then how do you end your day with a sense of accomplishment?
Absolutely. And tell us a little bit about what you do today in your business.
So now I work with clients, lots of times operational structure to create excellence. So in some cases, they're trying to affect a change. It could be everything from a new organization structure to an acquisition, and they're trying to have a consistent use of business processes or technology. Sometimes it is a cultural initiative and trying to create more engagement with their employees, but it's always about how do we either build efficiency, build scalability, something to help them to grow, right? No company hires me and says, yeah, we just want to maintain status quo.
Yeah.
So I had this year alone, I had two large, the most predominant clients that I had. One was $1 billion professional services in the healthcare industry, and one was a professional services in the automotive industry approaching their first 100 million. So on opposite ends of the spectrum, brought in for different things. Ultimately, both of those, the challenges that needed to be there were focused on operational excellence. How do you create it? How do you scale it? And how do you make it something that is sustainable within the employee organization, which is really why it's not just change management, it's organizational change management. Because if people don't adopt new ways of working, new technology, new belief structure, they will not sustain change that you're hoping for. And that starts at the leadership level, but it filters throughout the entire organization. And that's one of the things that I promote every day, every time, every client. Sometimes leaders, I will refer to them as mirror moments. Sometimes leaders have to look in the mirror and say, how can I help to affect that? Because it's not a given.
Mm-hmm.
Leadership is hard. It's hard. It's getting harder every minute. And you can't plug something into ChatGPT and have AI spit out, how do I be a better leader? It doesn't come that easily. Well, you probably can, but it's not going to be authentic.
You can do it. I don't know how much the answer will be good.
Correct. But I do think that's some of the work that I've done with clients, everything from, creating real motivation around core values and delivering on those, all the way through to, I have a proposal out with a client right now who 4 years ago formed a company, took off, wildly successful, wildly. And they are a product of their own success. It is the CEO, and they've got a couple of other C-suite chief marketing kind of officers. They have all very unique titles in their company. They are hanging on by their fingernails because they didn't create any kind of operational standards or any operational processes. Every day is a new exciting adventure as to how we doing it today. But the sad part is their customer set knows that they're hanging on by their fingernails. It's very obvious. Things are breaking. They don't have a huge degree of repeat business. They have people that believe in their mission and believe in what they're delivering and like their product. But getting to the end result is really painful. So I've been talking with them. I talked with them, the CEO, a year ago, and I said, this needs, and I actually volunteered at the time. I said, give me 5 days with your team. I'll fix it. And no, we're fine. And then about a month and a half ago, she called me out of the blue and she said, this is going to be a vulnerable call for me. I got to tell you. Yeah. So I'm hopeful that I will work with them and really help them to put in enough operational excellence and enough structure that will allow them to actually do all the great work that they're doing, but they're exhausted and that they can't maintain, and they certainly can't scale at the level that they're at.
Yeah. And before we end our call, I just want to make sure that we talk about your book.
Yes.
So
my book?
Yeah. Become an Unstoppable Woman Entrepreneur. So tell us a little bit about it.
So I was invited to contribute to this anthology of entrepreneurial women, their stories. And I started that journey mostly because it was something to talk about. I was a little nervous about sharing my journey and wanting clients to necessarily see it.
Mm-hmm.
I actually had, at the time, I had a very trusted client. And even before it went out, I said, can you read this and tell me how you would react? Would you still hire me? Or would you think, gosh, because I'm very open about the toxicity in the work environment, some of the trauma that I went through both personally and professionally that led me to being this. I do think that there's an awful lot, and certainly lots of women, you go through enough things and it builds a bit of scar tissue and a bit of resilience that you didn't think you could have. I look back and I think there are days I did not know how I got up in the morning, let alone continued and succeeded. And enough of those days built together. So I was thrilled to be able to put the book together. And what's interesting is that I bought 100 copies at the end of the process. And I tell people all the time, I didn't buy them to sell them. I know people, you're supposed to sell a book. But through my relationship building and networking with women, I have found and met so many women that are on this precipice or just starting their business, and they just need some cheerleading or some inspiration. And I'm not saying my story is the most inspirational. There's plenty of stories in the book. There's a woman, she was 65 years old. She started a cannabis company. Now, that's not my thing, but wow, how impressive is that she found the energy to be that unstoppable. So I actually send the book. I have a stack of books and I have a little mailers. And when I meet and talk with women, I say, would you send me your mailing address? And I just want more women to embrace those things that will make them truly unstoppable and find their own passion in their journey. And I am thrilled to be able to be a small little glimmer of sunshine, perhaps, or just inspiration for women that are on their journey, because I do think that the problems in the world are many, that they have been created by a kind of thinking that didn't include a lot of women's brains at the table, and they're only going to be solved if more women step up and offer their insights and their wisdoms to solving some of those. And some of that may be creating their own business.
Could be. Well, thank you so much, Sarena. And
thank you.
How can women find you?
LinkedIn is the best. The hard part is the spelling of my first name.
You don't need to spell. Put the link.
Perfect. And then, or certainly on my website, diamondsolutiongroup.llc.com.
Thank you so much, Sarena. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much, Limor. All right.
Before we wrap up today's episode, I have something exciting coming next week that you don't want to miss. And this is especially for you if you are a new grad or early career in engineering and you're trying to figure out how to stand out in tech, or maybe you're a woman in tech struggling to make your voice heard. My next guest has been there where you are, and she's here to help you navigate your way up. So next week, I sit down with Akanksha Gupta. She's an engineering manager at DoorDash, and she has built an incredible career at companies like Netflix. And now she leads a high-stakes platform team at DoorDash, one of the fastest growing tech companies. And we dive into the number one mistake new grads make in tech and how to avoid it. The underrated soft skills that will get you promoted. And we also talk about how women can own their achievements and break through barriers. This episode is packed with actionable insights, and I love to hear your thoughts. And last but not least, I have a request for you. Here's how you can support this show. Please follow and subscribe to From a Woman to a Leader so you don't miss it. Rate and review. Your feedback is really important for me to reach more listeners and also to know what you want to hear from me. Please share this podcast with a friend or with someone who needs to hear these conversations. Mark your calendar for next week's episode. It's coming up every Wednesday. So the next episode with Akanksha drops on March 19. Thank you so much for being with me today, and I want to wish you a wonderful day.